Good morning and welcome to my first flipped class lesson. We're going to finish our plot diagram together. I'm going to talk about the rest of Oliver Twist, and then you are going to take some time and finish filling in the plot diagram. Let's go over what we looked at last week after we read the Reader's Theater play of Oliver Twist. We talked already about the exposition of the piece. When the piece started, Oliver was sent to a workhouse and he decided to run away because he was not happy there at all. And then we went ahead and talked about the ending of the piece, which was the resolution, and Mr. Brownlow adopts Oliver as his son. And we know that the resolution is directly connected to the conflict, which is in this center of the plot diagram in the star, okay? And the conflict in a short story has to be solved by the time the story is over, okay? And then we also ended with the climax, which I like to call the turning point. Remember, the climax of a piece is not always going to be the big bang or the big chase scene or the big blow up. It's not always going to be that. Sometimes it's just going to be a turning point in the piece where a character's thinking shifts, perhaps a setting shifts, someone has maybe an aha moment, but the trajectory of the story going upward from all of this rising action has a dramatic shift, and then everything coming down from the piece starts to unravel with your falling action, okay? And this story's climax was Oliver being forced to rob Mr. Brownlow's house. He didn't want to do that, and when that happened, remember, he dropped that lantern. We think he did it on purpose, and he and Oliver and Bill both got hit, okay? Now, what our task is going to be today is to fill in the rest of the rising action events between the exposition introduction and this turning point, and then between the turning point and the resolution, okay? So I want you to pause the video right now, and I want you to work on some of these rising action points before I go over them with you. There are 3 of them. So pause the video now and then come back and see if you were right. Welcome back. Okay, let's go over these and see what you think, okay? The first thing that happens after he leaves the workhouse, he's walking and walking and walking, and then we see that Oliver meets the Artful Dodger, right? So I'm going to write that right here. That's going to be the next part. And it's a good thing that he meets him because he has food, and Oliver is very hungry. Very, very hungry, right? Okay. And then after that, Artful Dodger shows him how he gets this food and how he keeps himself living, okay? And so we're going to talk about that event next. If you don't have that next event, you want to pause now, get that event down, and then check back and see if you were right. Welcome back. Okay, so the next event is going to be what happens after they've been spending some time together. They are out in the street a little while, and Artful Dodger is going to he's going to get caught stealing from Mr. Brownlow, but he knows how to run away and hide, but Oliver doesn't. Oliver doesn't know what's going on, and so Oliver gets hauled into court. So that's the next thing that happens, right? So Artful Dodger steals from Mr. Brownlow. Whoops. But Oliver gets caught and taken to court. With a story like this, there are so many events that happen. You have to think about the big events that happen along the way. And they have to be the events that are between your introduction and your climax that have relevance to both of those, because you don't want to run out of space and you don't want to talk about little teeny little things that don't make a big difference. You want to talk about the big picture. What's important here is that he meets Mr. Brownlow, which we know in the end is going to be a huge deal, right? Because Mr. Brownlow ends up adopting him. Okay? So what do you think happens after he gets hauled into court and they both, he's forced to rob Mr. Brownlow's house? Pause the video for a minute, write down what you think, and then come back and let me know. Welcome back. Okay, so after this, what's the big event that happens? Okay, well, remember during court, Mr. Brownlow felt really bad for Oliver and he thought he looked really sick. So Mr. Brownlow took him home, okay? And he gave him a good night's sleep and he gave him fresh clothes and he said, Oliver, take care of this errand for me. And when Oliver was running those errands, the thief group captured him again, didn't they? And they kidnapped him. And so that's the next event that goes here, and that fits perfectly because then the next thing they did was force him to rob him. So it's a big event here. Mr. B, we'll shorten that down because we're kind of running out of space. Mr. B takes Oliver home for the night and trusts him with an errand, comma, but the thieves kidnap him. That's terrible, right? Okay, and then we get to the climax where they use him to rob Mr. Brownlow, remember? Okay, so all of that's coming true, and it's not looking good for Oliver. And then, of course, Oliver gets injured. Now, the good news is we know it ends up well. We have a great Hollywood Disney ending. But what happens here for the falling action? Pause the video now and fill in your falling action and then come back and check with me and see if you got it right. Welcome back. Okay, so let's find out how the story unwinds and unravels to get to the resolution. And every short story is going to follow this sort of build up and then the unraveling to the ending, okay? So what happens after this? Another big event, a really important event. Remember that Nancy went to Mr. Brownlow for help. Dodger followed her. Remember that? And that was not a good thing, okay? So she went to Mr. Brownlow for help and Dodger followed her, okay? And then Nancy, the next event was what a lot of you thought was the turning point, but really Nancy dies for betraying Bill. And that was a shock when we read the play. That was a big deal, remember? Okay? And so then there was a big chase scene, and we were on the roof, and all these things were happening, and it was a horrible, horrible scene. And remember that Bill had Oliver on the roof as a hostage, but ends up what? What does he end up doing? Hanging himself. While running from the cops. Okay? So I guess everybody kind of got what was coming to them for the bad things that they did. It was really kind of a scary thing. And then, but what about Fagin, right? You have to read the book if you want to find out what happened to Fagin. And then we know that Mr. Brownlow adopts Oliver as his son, and that's how the story ended. I hope you liked my first flipped lesson, and I hope you did really well on your plot diagram, and I'll see you later.